Welcome to Movie Recall. In today's video, we will be going through the 2011 sci-fi thriller movie Limitless. It's time to recall. Let's get started. Turn on subtitles and spoilers ahead. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos like these. Eddie Mora is an aspiring writer living in New York. For the past several months, he's been living off a book contract advance and financial support from his girlfriend. The only problem is that he hasn't written a single word of his book. He struggles writing his story, going through a continuous cycle of writing, deleting, and starting over. He spends his afternoons drinking at a bar or wasting away on his couch in a messy apartment. Eventually, his girlfriend Lindy leaves him. While walking home, Vernon calls out to him. Vernon is Eddie's ex-wife's brother. After a little chit-chat, Vernon convinces him to have a drink together. They go to a bar and he tells him about how Melissa is doing. Then they start talking about Eddie's creative problems, and Vernon suggests he can help him. He shows him the drug he's selling. It's some kind of magic designer drug that supposedly can help you access your whole brain, allowing them to use 100% of their brain power. Eddie doesn't think it can help him. Vernon needs to leave, so he gives him his business card and a sample of the expensive drug for free. On his way home, Eddie contemplates his life. Thinking he's already at his low point, he takes the NZT, reasoning out that his life couldn't get any worse. He runs into his landlord's wife, Valerie, who hates him. She shouts at Eddie, but he has lost focus on what the lady is saying as the NZT is taking effect. He feels dizzy, and the drug's effect finally hits. He sees the lady's bag, and in it, a book about law. Eddie deducts that the lady dislikes him, but something else must be bothering her. He asks about law school, and the lady is surprised how Eddie knows about her studying law. Eddie recalls seeing the book once several years ago in a dorm room when he was still in college. Somehow, he now remembers everything he's ever read, seen, and heard in his entire life. Eddie then recommends a different book on the law that would be more appropriate for her assignment, and continues advising her about how she could proceed with her assignment. The lady is impressed, even attracted by Eddie's sudden mastery of law in court. She invites him in. He helps with her assignment, and they eventually have intercourse. Eddie is perplexed as to how he suddenly has all of this knowledge. He realizes that he always had this knowledge, just in a random mess in his head. The NZT must have helped his brain rearrange and analyze the pieces of information he has in his head and turn them into a congruent and organized thought that he now has complete access to. Every documentary, every magazine article, every movie, every commercial, anything he's ever read and seen has now been turned into an accessible stream of information. He heads back to his dirty apartment and starts cleaning. He starts writing and ends up with a 90-page preliminary manuscript. The following day, he feels the NZT's effects had worn off. He takes his manuscript to his editor. The editor is doubtful, but reads it anyway. When Eddie reaches home, he receives voice messages from his editor praising him. Eddie then decides he'd need more NZT and heads to Vernon's apartment. Eddie shows up at Vernon's apartment, and Vernon immediately knows what Eddie wants. Vernon then reveals that he lied about NZT being legal and approved by the FDA. Regardless, Eddie still wants more. Vernon asks Eddie to head out to do some chores, and Eddie complies, thinking he'd do what's necessary to get more NZT. He arrives back at the apartment and sees the door busted open. He sees Vernon's apartment had been ransacked, and Vernon on the couch with a bullet hole in his head. Eddie calls the police, but realizes he needs to find Vernon's NZT stash before the cops arrive. He finds a pack of NZT along with Vernon's list of clients and cash. At the police station, Eddie is interviewed and gets a phone call from Melissa. The police then tell Eddie that they'll stay in contact. At home, Eddie takes another pill, and his creative juices start flowing. With Vernon's cash, Eddie gets a haircut and new clothes. He starts getting in shape and even finishes his book in 4 days. He learns to play the piano in 3 days and notices he can learn any language by listening to it. Eddie becomes outgoing, meeting new people and impressing everyone with his mastery of almost any field. He becomes daring, his shyness gone, and he feels like he could achieve anything he ever wanted. Eddie gets a realization and suddenly knows what he needs to do. He'd delve into the world of stock trading. He meets Kevin, a broker working in Wall Street, and he becomes Eddie's entry point into the world of stocks. Eddie starts reading books on stock trading and monitors the stock market for movement. With NZT, he grew Vernon's remaining $800 to $2,000 in a day. The next day, it reaches $7,500. Eddie needs more capital for growth and decides to seek help from a loan shark, Gennady. Gennady decides to give Eddie the loan, but warns that he must be paid on time. Eddie takes the risk, confident that he would pay Gennady back in no time. The following day, Eddie heads to Kevin's brokerage firm and starts buying and selling stocks. Within 2 weeks, Eddie increased his brokerage account to over $2 million. Word starts getting around, and soon, Kevin calls him to say that a Wall Street tycoon wants to meet with him. That evening, Eddie has dinner with Lindy and tells her all about the good things he's been doing with his life. Seeing Eddie clean up his act, Lindy is proud, and Eddie tells her he just got a sudden wake-up call and decided to get his life together. After dinner, they head back to Lindy's place and make love. Over the next couple of days, the couple rediscover their love, and soon, Lindy tells Eddie that she wants to be together with him again. As they talk about restarting their relationship, Eddie spots a man eyeing them from a distance. Later that night, Lindy is in bed asking him to join her, but Eddie stumbles and he's transported to the hallway in an instant. Eddie has no recollection of how he got out of his apartment, but Lindy sees him and asks him to go inside for a meal. The following day, Kevin joins Eddie for their meeting with the Wall Street giant. Kevin is nervous, but Eddie assures him that the meeting would be fine. Carl Van Loon, a Wall Street icon, arrives and they start talking. Carl's companion is suspicious of Eddie and how he climbed up the ladder so fast, thinking it's a con. But Eddie talks his way through his questioning and impresses Carl. On a car ride home, Carl hands Eddie a stack of papers about the companies he owns and asks Eddie to take a look and to analyze a pattern, and asks him what a good move would be. Eddie takes a thorough look and realizes that Carl must be planning a massive merger with a competing company. Carl's impressed even further, noticing how nobody could have figured that out in such a short amount of time. Carl gives Eddie a chance to restructure the deals between the companies and asks Eddie to meet him the following day. He went out walking. Still, he finds himself having episodes of unconsciousness, finding himself in different parts of the city and having no recollection of how he got there. He stumbles into several parties, into different clubs, meeting different women, and eventually ending up in a hotel room with a model where they have intercourse. Unbeknownst to Eddie, the strange man that he had seen earlier is following him. After leaving the hotel, Eddie heads to the subway, where he runs into a group of thugs and gets into a fight. The NZT helps him remember every self-defense video, action movie, fight scene, and survival documentary he's ever seen, and he manages to fight off the group of thugs single-handedly. He starts running afterward and finds himself atop the Brooklyn Bridge by dawn with no recollection of what happened to him in the past 18 hours. Eddie heads home and gets to bed and wakes up the next day feeling horrible. He decides not to take another tablet and tries to go through the documents sent to him by Carl, but they seem illegible. Eddie goes to the meeting sober and unprepared. Carl keeps asking him questions, expecting high-level answers from him, but all Eddie can focus on is the TV, where the news are reporting that the woman he was in the hotel with is dead. He leaves the meeting abruptly. He heads home and gets a call from Melissa, who is asking questions about Vernon's death. Eddie asks her if they could meet up somewhere, and Melissa reluctantly agrees. Eddie goes through Vernon's notebook at a park, looking up Vernon's clients and calling them to find out more about the effects of NZT. Each number he calls, everyone on the list is either dead or terribly sick. The last number he dials belongs to the man who followed him and who's sitting near to him. It's the same man who had followed Eddie and the model to the hotel. Eddie sees him and runs as the man chases after him. He finally loses him by going inside a cab. He meets with Melissa, and she tells him that she had also been on the drug and barely made it out alive when she stopped using it. 2 years have passed, and the after effects still haven't worn off. She recommends that Eddie stop taking the pill too, but tells him to lower the dosage as a sudden stop would be lethal. Eddie heads home, but runs into Gennady. Gennady beats up Eddie and demands his payment. They stumble their way up Eddie's apartment, and Eddie drops an NZT pill. Gennady picks up the pill, believing it to be some kind of drug, and takes it himself. They then head to the bank, and Eddie gives him the money. Gennady notes that the pill made him feel excellent, and he'd be asking for more soon. Eddie makes his way to Lindy's office and collapses. Eddie is left with no choice but to tell Lindy everything. Lindy finally understands the source of Eddie's newfound motivation and agrees to retrieve the pills for him. She heads home, takes the rest of the drugs, and heads back. On her way back, she sees the man following him. She runs into the city park and asks 2 men to help her, but the pursuer stabs both men and continues chasing after Lindy. Lindy hides behind some boulders and calls Eddie. Eddie advises her to take one of the pills as it would give her the power to overcome the situation, and she does. After the pill takes effect, she knows what she has to do to escape from the man chasing her. She runs into the ice skating rink and carries a child, spinning her around and allowing the child's ice skates to slice the man's face. The man falls, and Lindy gets away. The following day, Lindy expresses her concerns about the pill, saying it turned her into a completely different person. Eddie promises he'll stop taking the pill as soon as he gets enough money. On the street, Eddie sees Gennady spying on him. Eddie approaches, and Gennady says he needs more of the pill. Eddie gives him a few but realizes Gennady won't stop. Later, he hires 2 bodyguards that follow him everywhere, and he goes to see Carl. Eddie apologizes about the meeting, explaining he was sick, but he had already won the man over before, so Carl still gives him the job. He brokers the biggest merger in the city for Carl and gets back on his feet. Eddie discovers that if he slept properly, stayed hydrated and fed, abstained from alcohol, and maintained a steady dose, the blackout episode stopped. He has suits custom made for him, all with a hidden pocket for the NZT he has. Not waiting around until his stash of the drug runs out, he goes to a chemist and tells him that he'll give him $2 million if he recreates it in 6 months. While having lunch, he spots the detective that interviewed him about Vernon's death. The detective informs him that Eddie is now a suspect in the model's death, as one eyewitness placed him at the crime scene. Eddie hires Morris Brandt, one of the best and most ruthless lawyers in New York. Brandt gets him walking free temporarily, saying the evidence the police had is too weak. Carl and Eddie meet with Atwood again, and they observe Atwood's deteriorating health. Eddie heads back to his hotel room and finds his room trashed. Security is now a primary concern, so he buys a luxurious penthouse apartment with a top-of-the-notch security system. Later, Eddie runs into Gennady, who now has his own set of thugs guarding him. Gennady demands 20 more pills and blackmails Eddie with the model's death. The next day, Carl and Eddie are waiting for Atwood to come in and sign the documents for the merger. When he doesn't show up, his wife comes to their offices to tell them that he's sick, but as soon as he's better, he will sign the contract. The two of them walk her out, and as she's going into the car, Eddie sees that the man who has been following him is getting inside the car with her. Her husband was sick because of the drug. Eddie meets his lawyer in a police station and gets into a police lineup. Eddie takes his jacket off and hands it to Brandt. After the lineup, he meets up with Brandt again, and he tells him that Eddie is cleared of suspicion. Brandt then compliments Eddie's suit jacket. He makes his way back to Carl's office and discovers Atwood is now in a coma. He heads to the bathroom to take another pill and discovers his secret pocket is empty. His stash is gone. He goes back to Carl and a package is brought to him. He opens it and sees his disembodied bodyguard's hands inside. In shock, he runs out of Carl's office and hurries home. He watches a news report regarding updates on Atwood's situation and sees that Brandt is also Atwood's attorney. Eddie then hears banging at his door and notices from the surveillance cameras that Gennady has arrived with his goons, using metal grinders and steel cutters to break in. Stuck in an inescapable situation, Eddie steps up to the balcony, readying himself to jump. As his foot slips, he stops himself, trying to remember if he had left even just a single tablet somewhere. He digs through his mind and recalls one being left in his old tin container. He reaches through the boxes and finds it, but Gennady breaks in, and Eddie trips on a box, losing the pill. Gennady's goons pin Eddie down, and Gennady shows Eddie an even better way of using NZT. He dissolves it and injects it directly into his bloodstream. He says it's more potent this way, it even lasts longer. He shoots up and tells his men to find Eddie's stash while he tortures him for the information. The henchmen start grinding into the safe in the next room while Gennady approaches Eddie, but Eddie stabs him with a knife he had earlier concealed. The two struggle, and Eddie drives the blade into Gennady, killing him. Eddie lays on the floor next to a bleeding Gennady. He eyes the needle Gennady had used to inject the NZT and decides to drink Gennady's blood, hoping to get some of the NZT into him. It works, and his brain starts working at total capacity. Now he knows how to fight off the goons. He takes down one of them and then the other. Meanwhile, Atwood dies at the hospital. Eddie appears at the hospital and sits down next to the driver. He wonders how Atwood died, even though they successfully got the NZT pills for him. The driver then helps Eddie find Brandt, finding out that Brandt had kept the pills for himself rather than give them to Atwood. They find the drugs in Brandt's closet. 12 months later, Eddie has a book out and is running for the Senate. He gets a call that a man representing a large pharmaceutical firm is waiting for him in his office. Eddie is surprised to see that the man is Carl. Carl now reveals that he knows about NZT, telling Eddie that the company he owns manufactures the drug. Carl offers Eddie a steady supply of NZT in exchange for a few favors he would later ask. Eddie refuses Carl's offer, but Carl warns that the illegal NZT labs have all been shut down. Eddie then reveals that he doesn't take NZT anymore. He had the drug tweaked and edited a while back, removing the side effects. He slowly took less and less NZT until he no longer depended on it, but the effects of the drug remained permanent on him. The modified NZT had permanently altered his brain patterns, and now, Eddie's brain is fully unlocked, even off the drug. Eddie shows this by predicting a van would hit a car because the driver is distracted. Carl looks over, and it happens. Eddie then places his hand on Carl's chest, saying he detects several problems with Carl's heart. Carl warns Eddie that he would be a brutal enemy, but Eddie is not threatened, saying he'd always be 50 steps ahead of him. He walks to a restaurant and meets with Lindy there. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.